I was sitting in a shared workspace recently, watching a scene that felt like a slow-motion car crash. There was this woman, clearly deep in focus, headphones on, laptop open, and a guy who just wouldn't stop dropping by her desk. He was beaming, full of that high energy, I'm just a people person, charisma. Every time she gave a polite, one-word answer, he'd lean in further, tossing out jokes, practically demanding a performance of friendship from her. The people around them just smiled. Someone even whispered to me, he's such a classic extrovert. He just has so much energy to share. It was the standard script. He was the vibrant giver, and she was the quiet introvert who just needed to be pulled out of her shell. But then the atmosphere shifted. She finally took her headphones off and said very calmly, I really need to focus on this report, so I can't chat right now. The transformation was instantaneous. The warmth didn't just dissipate. It curdled. His smile stayed fixed, but his eyes went cold. He didn't say, no problem. Instead, he sighed loudly, turned to the rest of the room and said, wow, okay. Sorry for trying to bring some life into this place. I forgot some people prefer to stay miserable in their little bubbles. That sudden pivot from friendly extrovert to insulted victim was jarring. In 5 seconds, he'd reframed her professional boundary as a personal attack on his good intentions. It made me realize that we often use the word personality to whitewash something much more invasive. When we equate crossing a boundary with being an extrovert, we aren't describing a social style. We are witnessing a behavioral choice to treat other people as tools for emotional regulation. If you've ever been told you're too sensitive or closed off or wanting your no to be respected, you're not dealing with a personality clash. You're dealing with a structural lie designed to make you responsible for someone else's lack of control.
Yeah, that instantaneous curdling of warmth into victimhood you just described, that's not an anomaly at all.
Right.
It's actually the exact functioning of a system that is operating exactly as it was designed to.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we've built entire corporate and, social ecosystems around this fundamental structural assumption, this idea that highly visible extroverted behavior is not just a biological preference, but like a moral imperative.
A moral imperative. So it's not just, oh, they're friendly. It's they are doing the right thing and you are doing the wrong thing by wanting quiet.
Precisely. And to really, truly dismantle how setting a basic boundary became pathologized in our society, we have to examine the physical realities of Western workplace cultures.
Right, because this doesn't just happen in coffee shops or shared workspaces. This is engineered into the very architecture where we work.
Exactly. I mean, consider a highly specific environment. Let's look at a top-tier fintech firm located in London's Canary Wharf.
Okay, setting the scene.
The sensory experience of this space is entirely intentional. It's an open-plan office designed by architects to serve as this, cathedral to collaboration.
Oh, I know those spaces.
Right. There are floor-to-ceiling glass walls, absolutely no desk dividers, and just a constant low-level hum of overlapping conversations, server fans, phones ringing.
Exhausting.
It feels less like a functional workspace and much more like a panopticon, a space where every single employee's physical availability and, frankly, their social readiness is constantly being monitored by everyone else.
Just being in a room like that, you can feel your nervous system bracing for impact. There's just nowhere to hide. You are constantly on display.
And in that glass panopticon, we find Julian. He's a senior financial analyst. Now, Julian is brilliant at his job,
right,
but his value in this specific environment is no longer measured strictly by the quality of his risk models or his predictive algorithms.
What's it measured by then?
It's measured by an entirely different metric, which we can call his personality capital.
Personality capital.
It's everything in that environment. And Julian's manager, Sarah, is the embodiment of this metric. She operates as this absolute whirlwind of high fives, loud public praise, and unscheduled syncs.
Oh, I've had managers like that. She thrives on immediate, frictionless access to her team.
She's the person who thinks a tap on the shoulder is always a welcome gift, regardless of what the other person is actually doing.
Right, she assumes her interruption is inherently valuable.
Exactly. But for Julian, the work he does requires deep, unbroken concentration. Every time Sarah sweeps by for an impromptu brainstorm, it just completely shatters his deep work state.
Which takes time to recover from, right?
Yeah, it takes him 20 minutes just to reorient his focus to the complex data sets he was analyzing. So Julian executes what is a completely rational professional maneuver.
What does he do?
He writes a small, very polite, do not disturb deep work sign and just tapes it to the corner of his computer monitor.
Which, if we are looking at this logically, is just a tool for productivity. He is literally trying to protect the company's investment in his time.
Absolutely. But practically, in that environment, what happens next reveals the structural lie we were talking about. Sarah does not see Julian's small paper sign as a productivity tool.
How does she see it?
She interprets it as a pathology. So, when Julian's quarterly performance review happens a few weeks later, Sarah officially marks him down.
For a sign.
For the sign.
Yeah.
She writes that he is demonstrating cultural misalignment.
Wow, cultural misalignment. That is such a chilling, bureaucratic way to say you aren't performing the personality I demand.
She formally suggests that Julian attend an HR-mandated assertiveness and communication workshop to overcome his quiet nature.
To overcome it, like it's a disease.
Exactly. Think about the mechanics of this interaction. Sarah has successfully framed her constant disruptive interruptions as a vibrant leadership style,
Right.
while simultaneously treating Julian's absolute necessity for focused, silent space as a communication deficit.
I want to really zero in on what Julian is experiencing in that moment. Picture him sitting in that transparent, glass-walled conference room during his review. He has to be experiencing this profound, quiet shame. He is realizing that his natural temperament, the very capacity for intense focus that makes him a great analyst, is being treated as a character flaw that will block his promotion.
Yeah, he is being forced into an impossible economic exchange. He has to spend his limited social and emotional currency just to buy back the silence he needs to actually do the job they hired him to do.
The act of setting a professional boundary has been completely reframed as professional treason. But I have to push back here, or at least ask the obvious question here. Like, how did corporate culture reach a point where quiet competence is viewed as a threat and a do not disturb sign is treated as an HR violation?
Well, to understand that, we really have to look at a profound historical shift that occurred primarily during the Industrial Revolution.
Okay, let's pull that thread.
Before industrialization, in the 18th and 19th centuries, Western societies were overwhelmingly agrarian. People lived in small, rural communities.
Right, farm towns.
Yeah. You interacted with the same farmers, the same blacksmith, and the same neighbors from the day you were born until the day you died.
Right. If you were the town baker in 1850, people bought your bread because you made good bread and because they knew your family. They didn't buy it because you had a magnetic personality and a great elevator pitch.
Exactly. And cultural historians like Warren Sussman, they define this era as the culture of character.
Culture of character.
Success and social standing were rooted in inner virtue, morality, reliability, and lifelong community knowledge. Who you were in the dark was what really mattered.
But then the cities happened.
Right. The transition into the 20th century completely annihilated that agrarian structure. Industrialization forced a mass, rapid migration away from the farms and into massive urban centers.
Suddenly, millions of individuals were crammed into factories, department stores, and these early corporate offices.
And they were suddenly surrounded by thousands of complete strangers, absolute anonymity. And in a sea of strangers, your lifelong reputation means nothing because no one knows it. Survival and economic success suddenly depended entirely on making immediate, striking, positive impressions on people who knew absolutely nothing of your inner moral compass.
So we transitioned from the culture of character to
the culture of personality. We transitioned aggressively. It became a survival mechanism. Every individual was suddenly expected to become a performing self.
It's the birth of the salesman as the ultimate cultural icon. If you want to survive the city, you can't just be honest, you have to be captivating.
Poise, charm, and the ability to rapidly influence strangers became the absolute only metrics for upward mobility. And this anxiety, it was immediately capitalized upon by the emerging self-help and advertising industries.
Of course, they saw a market.
In 1936, right in the middle of the Great Depression, when economic anxiety was just at its absolute peak, Dale Carnegie published How to Win Friends and Influence People.
The ultimate playbook for the culture of personality.
Carnegie codified this new reality. He explicitly argued that even in highly rigorous technical fields like engineering, even engineering, he claimed a mere 15% of financial success was due to actual technical knowledge. A staggering 85% was due to skill in human engineering, meaning personality, charm, and the ability to lead people.
So the message was basically, your actual skills do not matter if you can't put on a show. And I imagine advertisers just poured gasoline on the insecurity.
Oh, they weaponized it perfectly. Historical archives show a highly illuminating 1921 advertisement for Woodbury's facial soap.
Soap How do you make soap about personality?
It didn't just sell cleanliness. The ad featured an illustration of a crestfallen, beautiful young woman sitting completely alone in a dimly lit room.
Okay.
And the ad copy sympathized with her, stating she had longed to be successful, gay, triumphant, but because she lacked the right complexion and therefore the right magnetic presence, she was a total social failure.
Wow, that is so manipulative.
The underlying threat was incredibly clear. You are constantly being judged by strangers, your inner worth is totally invisible, and an extroverted, flawless performance is your only rescue.
So the extrovert ideal wasn't born from psychological health. It was born from the brutal economic necessities of rapid urbanization and mass consumption. But wait, it wasn't just advertisers and businessmen pushing this narrative. If it was just capitalism, we could see through it, I think. The truly damaging part is that the psychological community, the actual doctors, actively validated this bias.
Oh, they put a medical scientific stamp of approval on it.
They validated the idea that wanting to be alone was a literal sickness.
And that medical stamp of approval caused generational damage. The psychoanalytic bias against introversion is deeply entrenched, and the architecture of that bias can be traced directly to Sigmund Freud. It is vital here to contrast Freud with Carl Jung. In the early 1900s, Jung published Psychological Types, where he officially introduced the concepts of introversion and extroversion.
And how did Jung see them?
Jung viewed these as entirely neutral biological orientations. He suggested that introverts simply direct their life energy, their libido, in the broader sense of life, force inward toward the subject, their own minds.
And extroverts.
Extroverts directed outward toward the object, the external world. Neither was better. They were just different engines running on different fuels.
Jung basically said, some cars run on gas, some run on diesel. Both are fine. But Freud completely hijacked that, didn't he?
Freud vehemently attacked Jung's neutral framing. In a foundational 1911 essay, Freud entirely dismissed the idea that inward focus could be healthy in any way.
Really, he just threw it out.
He equated introversion directly with pathology. He argued that turning one's psychic energy away from the external reality and retreating into the inner world was the indispensable precondition for neurosis and even schizophrenia.
Wait, he linked wanting quiet to schizophrenia.
Yes. In Freud's framework, an introvert wasn't just someone who preferred quiet, they were someone who was failing to cope with reality, retreating into a sick, narcissistic fantasy.
Freud was the father of modern psychoanalysis. How did the entire psychiatric community just let him pathologize half the human race without demanding biological proof?
Because at the time, Freud held a virtual monopoly over the early field of psychology. His theories became unquestioned dogma.
Fine.
And this wasn't just a theoretical debate, it had devastating practical applications. This bias was hard-coded into the earliest psychological testing. Well, in 1946, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, the MMPI, was published. It quickly became the most widely used and researched personality test in the world.
We use that for everything, right?
Everything from clinical diagnosis to corporate hiring.
And what did the MMPI do to introverts?
It added the social introversion scale. But here is the critical flaw. The test was specifically constructed and normed using patients in psychiatric wards.
Wait, what?
The baseline assumption built right into the mathematics of the test was that individuals who measured high on social introversion were inherently more likely to possess symptoms of mental illness compared to those who rated as highly extroverted.
So the test was rigged from the start. If you answered, I prefer reading a book to going to a loud party, the test scientifically categorized you as closer to being mentally unstable.
And this institutional pathologization reached its absolute terrifying zenith in 1980.
1980? That's not even that long ago.
No, it's not. That year, the American Psychiatric Association was drafting the DSM-3, which is the absolute Bible of psychiatric diagnosis.
Right.
The APA actually proposed including introverted personality disorder as a formal diagnosable mental illness.
Stop. They seriously tried to classify wanting to be alone on a Friday night as a psychiatric disorder. They were going to put it in the same book as schizophrenia and severe depression.
Yes, they did. They viewed a lack of desire for constant social engagement as a schizoid trait. It was only after a massive coordinated letter-writing campaign by a subset of enraged mental health professionals that the APA finally withdrew the proposed diagnosis before publication.
Thank goodness someone pushed back.
But the mere fact that it was drafted, debated, and almost published demonstrates how completely the extrovert ideal had infected the scientific community's view of normal human behavior.
If we pull the thread on this, it means Julian's manager, Sarah, in that Canary Wharf office isn't just being annoying. She is acting as the unwitting enforcer of a 100-year-old pseudoscientific lie.
Exactly.
But modern neuroscience has completely destroyed Freud's view, right? We now have the actual biological mechanics of these temperaments.
Dutifully, and the biology entirely dismantles the premise of an introverted defect. The physiological truth resides primarily in a network of neurons located in the brainstem.
Okay, getting into the brain.
It's called the reticular activating system, or the RAS. Think of the RAS as the brain's gatekeeper.
The gatekeeper.
It monitors incoming neural impulses from our sensory environment, so sound, light, social interaction, and it controls the arousal level of the cerebral cortex.
Okay, let me unpack this. So if the RAS is a gatekeeper, think of it like a built-in volume knob for the brain.
That is an incredibly accurate analogy. According to the foundational biological research pioneered by psychologist Hans Eysenck, introverts and extroverts are born with fundamentally different baseline settings on that volume knob.
So they are literally wired differently from birth.
Introverts naturally possess a significantly higher baseline level of cortical arousal. Because their brains are already operating at a very high level of internal electrical stimulation, they require far less external input from the world to reach a comfortable threshold of alertness.
Okay, so their volume knob is naturally sitting at an 8 out of 10 just from their own thoughts and internal processing.
Exactly. Therefore, if you put an introvert in a highly stimulating environment, like a loud open-plan office or a crowded networking event, their RAS gets flooded.
The volume goes too high.
The incoming sensory data pushes their cortical arousal from an 8 up to a 12. They redline.
They redline, wow.
They become physiologically overwhelmed, exhausted, and literally unable to function optimally. Extroverts, conversely, possess a naturally lower baseline of cortical arousal.
So where's their volume knob?
Their volume knob naturally sits at like a 3 out of 10.
So if an extrovert is sitting alone in a quiet room, they aren't feeling peaceful. They're feeling understimulated. They're experiencing a kind of sensory deprivation.
To achieve a comfortable baseline of arousal, an extrovert must actively seek out external stimulation. They need the crowds, the loud noises, the constant interruptions, and the rapid-fire conversations just to wake their cortex up to a functional level.
Let's apply this biological reality directly back to Julian and Sarah.
Okay.
If Julian's brain is already operating at a higher baseline of arousal, that do not disturb sign is not a passive-aggressive social rejection. It is literally an act of physiological self-regulation. He is trying to keep his cortical arousal from redlining so his brain can process the financial data.
Yes, and Sarah's constant interruptions aren't just a minor annoyance. They are a sensory assault that actively prevents Julian from utilizing his cognitive capacity.
Wow.
When Sarah uses her authority to demand that Julian attend an assertiveness workshop, she is not asking him to learn a new skill. She is demanding that he permanently override his own neurology simply to appear culturally aligned with her.
That's devastating when you frame it like that.
And the ultimate tragedy is that Julian, lacking this biological context, internalizes his exhaustion as a personal failure.
He thinks something is wrong with him.
He believes he is broken, rather than recognizing that he exists in a systemic bias that financially rewards extroverted neurobiology while actively punishing introverted neurobiology.
But that biological override doesn't just happen in Western corporate hubs, though. We see variations of this boundary-breaking behavior packaged as cultural norms globally. If we look at how different environments weaponize social obligation, the exact same suppression is happening under different names. Let's look at a completely different geography.
Where are you going?
Imagine a neon-lit barbecue restaurant in Seoul's Mapo district. It's late on a Tuesday. The air is incredibly thick with the scent of charcoal, grilled pork belly, and the heavy, unsaid rules of hoshik, which are the highly obligatory, deeply hierarchical after-work drinking sessions in South Korean corporate culture.
A setting where the physical space is tight and the social hierarchy is absolute.
Exactly. In this restaurant, we have Park, the senior manager. Park views himself as the eternal social battery of the department.
We all know Park.
He is loud, red-faced, and currently leaning heavily across the table, deeply invading the personal space of Minji, a junior recruit who just joined the firm out of university. You can see the physical tension.
Right.
Minji is leaning backward. The wooden legs of her chair are literally scraping against the floor as she attempts to maintain just a sliver of physical autonomy.
And what does Park do?
Park grabs a bottle of soju and decides to force a third massive round on her. Minji gives a polite bow of her head and softly declines, explaining she has a 2-hour train commute ahead of her and needs to be sharp for a presentation the next morning.
Observe the reaction to that boundary. Critical.
Right. Suddenly, Park's entire face contorts. But he doesn't pull rank. He doesn't say, I'm your boss, drink it.
What does he say?
He completely reframes his refusal to let her leave as an act of profound communal love. He slams the bottle down and loudly proclaims to the entire table, making sure everyone hears, that he is just a passionate extrovert who loves his team too much to let them sit in the dark.
This scenario exposes a deeply complex psychological dynamic that completely masquerades as extroversion. Notice a critical detail in your description of Park: the physical intensity, the loud proclamation, the demanding posture.
Yeah, he was taking up all the air in the room.
If you look closely at individuals enacting this specific behavior, there is often a desperate rigidity to them. Without a captive audience to consume his energy and reflect his authority back to him, Park lacks a solid sense of identity.
He isn't actually looking for a connection with Minji. He's looking for a mirror.
That is the crucial analytical distinction. What Park is displaying is not biological extroversion. It is a dependent interaction structure.
A dependent interaction structure.
A true extrovert, someone whose reticular activating system simply requires external sensory input to raise their arousal level, does not require the absolute submission of a specific individual.
Do they just need input, right?
Exactly. True extroverts observe reactions. They throw out a conversational bid, they ask for willingness, and most importantly, they accept rejection seamlessly. If one person says, I need to go home, a true extrovert simply moves on and finds stimulation from the music, the crowd, or someone else who is willing to engage. Their internal stability does not hinge on shattering someone else's boundary.
Because their brain just wants data. It doesn't need dominant.
Exactly. Park, however, is using Minji as an outsourced self-regulation unit.
Oh, an outsourced self-regulation unit.
His psychological equilibrium depends entirely on her playing the role of the submissive, willing recipient of his generosity. When she declines the drink, she isn't just saying no to alcohol.
What is she saying no to?
She is refusing to regulate his ego. When she steps out of the script, his psychological equilibrium shatters.
And to survive this, Minji is forced to deploy a very specific, deeply draining cognitive skill. She can't just tell him to back off.
No, she absolutely cannot. To understand the sheer weight of Minji's burden, we must examine the Korean concept of nunchi.
Nunchi.
Directly translated, nunchi means eye measure. It refers to the rapid, continuous, unspoken assessment of social dynamics, hierarchy, and mood within a room.
Like reading the room on steroids.
Now, nunchi, in its purest form, is a profound social virtue. What we call skilled nunchi is a high-level emotional intelligence. It is the ability to read incredibly subtle micro-expressions, detect shifting mental states, and expertly steer conversations to maintain harmony and ensure no one loses face.
It's the social glue that keeps a collective society running smoothly.
But what Minji is forced to utilize at that table is entirely different. She is engaging in what sociological literature categorizes as burdened nunchi.
Burdened nunchi? That sounds like a massive cognitive tax.
It is an exhausting survival mechanism. Burdened nunchi is specifically utilized by individuals lacking social power when they are trapped in oppressive or highly rigid hierarchical environments.
Because she can't fight back directly.
Minji cannot directly confront Park. Doing so would not only be viewed as deeply disrespectful in the context of Hoshik, but it could actively jeopardize her employment. Instead, her brain is forced to work in overdrive. She must use burden nunchi to invisibly manage his volatility. She leans back slightly to create space. He carefully modulates her tone to sound apologetic rather than defiant. She cites the commute rather than her dislike of him.
She's playing 4D chess just to avoid a drink.
She is actively calculating a dozen variables per second to manage his emotional state while desperately trying to protect her own boundaries. While skilled nunchi contributes to human flourishing, burden nunchi is a heavy, continuous tax paid by the subordinate to manage the psychological fragility of the superior.
And we have to be incredibly careful here not to engage in simplistic culture blaming. The idea that Korean culture makes people do this is completely wrong.
Entirely wrong.
Deference to authority is a long-standing historical value in South Korea, absolutely. But the weaponization of that deference by an individual like Park is a specific calculated behavioral abuse. It is not a mandate of the culture itself.
A very necessary distinction. Park is exploiting the cultural norm of deference to mask his psychological dependency.
And that masking is exactly what makes this so dangerous. Let's look at how Park justifies his behavior to the table. He says, I'm a passionate extrovert. This is the ultimate whitewashing of aggression.
Yes.
By packaging his boundary crossing as extroverted friendliness, he successfully shifts the accountability away from his intentional aggressive act. He turns a deliberate behavioral choice into a fixed personality trait.
And the moment that shift occurs, the entire power dynamic inverts.
Exactly. When society accepts the premise that he's just an extrovert, then the person setting the boundary, Minji, automatically becomes the problem.
She becomes the villain.
Her polite refusal to be used as his emotional sponge is instantly pathologized. The rest of the table will whisper that she is too closed off or not a team player. Meanwhile, his overt aggression is normalized as just being social.
It's gaslighting on a systemic level.
When a corporate HR department or a manager or a social group says something to you like, you need to learn to adapt to different personalities, or he just needs a little response to be happy, the true unspoken translation is terrifying.
What is the translation?
It's, this system will not change, so you must. It means he relies on your submission for his emotional stability, and we as an organization allow it.
The system actively protects the boundary violator. The organization implicitly demands that introverts act as the shock absorbers for the aggressor's unmanaged anxiety, simply because it is easier to tell a quiet person to smile than it is to hold a loud person accountable for their intrusion.
Wow.
The phrase aggressive altruism perfectly encapsulates this.
Forcing a gift of conversation or a drink on someone who clearly does not want it.
Exactly. The altruism is merely a Trojan horse for the aggression. The aggressor forces an interaction under the guise of benevolence.
But the horse has soldiers inside.
But the absolute proof of this dynamic reveals itself the moment the Trojan horse is rejected. When the target firmly refuses the interaction, the aggressor's true emotional state violently unmasks itself.
And that leads us directly into the deep psychological mechanisms at play when these forced dependent interactions finally face a hard boundary.
Yes.
To see what that unmasking looks like, let's look at the fallout in a completely different everyday setting.
Okay.
Imagine a standard apartment building hallway. We have Leo, a quiet guy coming home from a long shift, and his neighbor, Marcus. Marcus is the classic building busybody.
Oh, the hallway trap.
He constantly uses the "I'm just a talker, I love people" excuse to corner neighbors in the hallway. Marcus ambushes Leo by the mailboxes. Now, Leo's body language is entirely checked out.
He's broadcasting, leave me alone.
Completely. He has his keys already in his hand, his feet are pointed toward his door, he is avoiding eye contact, and he is giving flat, one-word answers.
A textbook display of boundary setting through nonverbal cues.
Right. But Marcus completely ignores the physical cues. Marcus views his own behavior as purely benevolent. In his mind, he's the friendly extrovert, bringing life and community to a cold building.
Yes.
But then comes the breaking point. Leo finally drops the burden munchie. He stops trying to manage Marcus's feelings.
He hits his limit.
Leo turns, looks Marcus in the eye, and says very firmly, "Marcus, I don't want to chat right now. I need to get inside and be alone."
The boundary is moved from the implicit to the explicit.
Instantly, the mask of the cheerful extrovert shatters. Marcus does not say, "Oh, my bad, have a good night." He doesn't back away gracefully.
Oh, you.
His face drops. He turns on his heel, storms into his own apartment, and within 3 minutes, Leo's phone lights up. Marcus sends a barrage of vitriolic text messages.
A barrage.
He calls Leo a cold, elitist snob. He tells Leo he is mentally unstable and needs therapy for his antisocial behavior. The chilling part here isn't just the anger itself. It is the terrifying speed at which the supposedly generous friendliness mutates into calculated, cruel aggression. The absolute second relaunch. Marcus loses the mirror he felt entitled to use.
This specific, violently sudden pivot from warmth to vitriol is one of the most well-documented phenomena in social psychology.
Really? There's a name for it.
It can be completely and thoroughly explained by the mechanism of cognitive dissonance.
Leon Festinger's theory from the 1950s.
Festinger's cognitive dissonance theory remains one of the most robust frameworks for understanding human self-delusion.
How does it work here?
The theory posits that human beings require absolute consistency between their internal beliefs, their self-concept, and their external behaviors or realities. When an individual detects a harsh conflict between who they believe they are and what reality is telling them, they experience severe psychological discomfort.
So it's not just a passing thought.
This isn't just a mild annoyance. It is a measurable state of physiological stress known as negative arousal.
It physically feels bad. The brain sounds an alarm.
Now, apply this mechanism to Marcus in the hallway. Marcus's entire psychological architecture, his fundamental self-concept, is built upon the narrative that he is a friendly, benevolent, universally beloved extrovert.
Right. He deeply believes he is giving Leo a gift by forcing him to talk.
He sees himself as the hero of the hallway.
Exactly.
When Leo delivers that firm, explicit boundary, "I don't want to chat," it acts as a stark, undeniable rejection of Marcus's entire narrative.
A reality check.
The objective reality of the situation, that Marcus is actually being intrusive, annoying, and unwanted, clashes violently with his internal self-perception as the beloved socialite. The dissonance is massive.
His brain basically short circuits because it cannot handle being the bad guy in its own movie.
And because Marcus lacks the emotional competence, the effortful control, and the baseline humility to accept the rejection gracefully, the negative arousal he experiences becomes completely intolerable.
So he has to fix the feeling.
His psychological immune system kicks into overdrive to reduce this dissonance. Now, the healthy, mature way to reduce dissonance in this scenario would be to change his own behavior and self-concept.
He could say, "I apologize. I didn't realize I was holding you up. Perhaps I'm too pushy sometimes," and alter his future interactions.
But that requires an ego death. That requires admitting he was wrong.
Which he cannot do.
So instead of altering his behavior, Marcus unconsciously chooses a defensive emotion regulation strategy.
Yeah.
He fundamentally alters his cognition of Leo.
He rewrites Leo.
In order for Marcus to remain the good guy and the benevolent extrovert in his own mind, the person rejecting him must be demonized. Leo cannot simply be tired.
Leo must be mentally unstable.
Leo cannot simply want quiet. Leo must be an elitist snob.
Yeah.
This aggressive reframing has absolutely nothing to do with objective facts.
It's all internal.
It is purely an emotion regulation strategy deployed by the brain to protect the aggressor's fragile ego from the devastating reality of their own intrusive behavior.
That perfectly explains why he changes the narrative. But it doesn't entirely explain the sheer level of rage. Like, why doesn't Marcus just walk into his apartment, roll his eyes, think Leo's a jerk, and watch TV?
Right.
Why does he escalate to active hostility? Why pick up the phone and send the barrage of vitriolic texts?
To understand the escalation from internal dissonance into active outward hostility, we have to layer on a second psychological framework. Self-perception theory, proposed by psychologist Daryl Bem in the 1970s.
How does that differ from dissonance?
Self-perception theory suggests a fascinating inversion of how we normally think about our emotions. Usually, we believe we feel an emotion first, and then we act.
We feel angry, so we yell.
Bem argued that often, especially when our internal cues are chaotic or ambiguous, individuals infer their own attitudes and feelings by passively observing their own behavior from the outside.
Right.
We watch what we do, and then our brain decides how we must be feeling.
Wait, so you're saying we don't actually know how angry we are until we watch ourselves acting angry?
In many highly escalated conflicts, yes. When Marcus experiences that initial jolt of painful dissonance in the hallway, he reacts defensively. He retreats to his apartment, pulls out his phone, and starts furiously typing out a mean text message as a knee-jerk reaction to feeling slighted.
Okay.
Now, pop psychology and the widely misunderstood catharsis hypothesis would tell you that expressing this anger venting, typing the text, screaming into a pillow should release the internal pressure and make him feel better.
The idea that you have to let the steam out of the kettle.
Exactly. But decades of empirical research prove that the catharsis hypothesis is fundamentally flawed, especially in cases of uncivil disagreement and targeted hostility.
Venting doesn't work.
Venting does not work. When individuals lash out with uncivil, aggressive behavior like name-calling or firing off vitriolic messages, they are not experiencing a healthy cathartic release of built-up pressure.
So what is actually happening in Marcus's brain as he types those texts?
The act of expressing hostility actively generates and amplifies the anger. As Marcus watches his own thumbs type out words like mentally unstable and elitist, self-perception theory kicks in.
His brain is watching him type.
His brain passively observes his highly aggressive behavior and logically infers, I am acting with extreme hostility toward Leo, therefore, I must be incredibly angry. And if I am this angry, Leo must have done something truly terrible to deserve it.
It's a closed-loop system of rage. The expression of the incivility literally creates a feedback loop that continually intensifies the negative emotion.
Exactly. The action fuels the emotion, which fuels more action. This is the precise mechanism that explains why the friendly mask shatters so completely and irreparably.
Fine.
The resulting anger reveals the fundamental underlying truth of the dynamic. The interaction in the hallway was never actually about shared joy. It was never about extroverted energy or community building or connection.
It was entirely 100% about control.
When Marcus loses control over Leo's time, attention, and physical presence, the benevolence simply vanishes because the benevolence was only ever a tool utilized to secure Leo's submission.
When you lay out the mechanics like that, the reality becomes simple. If a coworker, a boss, or a neighbor tells you, "I'm just an extrovert, I'm just friendly," but then reacts with rage, passive aggression, and plays the victim the exact moment you firmly set a boundary, you have absolute clinical proof that the interaction had nothing to do with extroversion.
None whatsoever.
True extroverts, the people whose reticular activating systems just need a little extra background noise, do not experience a profound identity crisis when someone wants to go home. The vitriol is simply the violent backlash of an exposed dependency. It is the temper tantrum of a person who uses the social contract to force others to regulate their anxiety.
Synthesizing the historical evolution from the culture of character, the biological realities of the brainstem, and the psychological mechanisms of cognitive dissonance, the conclusion we reach is strictly objective.
The equation is broken.
The persistent equation of boundary-breaking behavior with extroversion is a structural lie.
A lie that protects the aggressor.
Real extroversion is a documented, neutral neurological baseline. It is merely a state of lower cortical arousal seeking external engagement to reach equilibrium.
Just a brain looking for input?
It is not, and has never been, a biological license to trample the autonomy of others.
Right.
The pervasive use of personality differences to demand forced interactions, whether it happens under the fluorescent lights of a Canary Wharf office, across a table in a Mapo district restaurant, or in the hallway of a residential building, is a calculated psychological manipulation.
It shifts the blame.
It is a system designed to make individuals, very often introverts, permanently responsible for another person's complete lack of emotional control and inability to self-regulate.
Refusing to be designated as an emotional stabilizer for someone else is not a personality flaw. It is a deeply rational choice to reject a dependent interaction structure.